Tate Schoolers? Welcome to another great episode of Tate Schooler Fitness Corner podcast. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest, Mr. Hovind, the creative, was joining us today to talk about his journey, talk about why he do what he do, and just how the state of being a creative in time like this, motivation, inspiration, all that good stuff, the ups and downs of really bringing art to us. And art speaks in so many ways of its expression that a lot of us cannot even kind of start to express. So I love speaking with creators. I love sitting down and talking with artists. I consider myself an artist myself, but welcome anyway. How are you doing today, Joe?
I am good. It's Wednesday, so we're halfway through the week, so I'm excited. So I'm doing good today.
Absolutely. Good. I want to ask you, so when did you realize that you had this creative side of you? When did this come?
I think I've been like this since I was a kid, to be honest. And I don't think it was something that was like cultivated. It was just something that came naturally. I'd write books and like perform poems for like the competitions we'd have in school and go like to state and things of that sort. And I used to, my first love was drawing. So I used to draw a lot. Me and my cousins. My dad was an artist. He has like letters from like Charlie Brown, like who like said like, oh, I liked your, things. So my dad has always been like a talent in that respect. And then me and my cousin kind of took that like seriously. And that was a way for me and my dad to bond. We do it on projects, just get together and do art. So it's always something that was embraced, I think, in a hobby pastime type of way amongst me and specifically my dad, I would say. But just because anything that he could get his hands on and stuff like that, he'd work around. But getting older, I think it was kind of like most kids, like you're pushed towards, find something that, will make you an instant kind of gratification. And so I've always had a cultivation of like making sure that I do both. And so in school, like, I'd do, I ran track and cross country, or I'd, make sure I was good academically and or participating in clubs like student government and stuff like that. But I always made sure I had the space to be like, if there's theater or if there's, an art class I can take on the side, things of that sort, even in college. So I would say it cultivated very, very early and just kind of became a natural part of just kind of that secondary piece that you always had, that I would always have.
So your father is actually very talented when it comes to art as well.
Yeah, he's a very great, like I have like the pictures and the things I could like show. Like my dad has always been very talented at like drawing and art or even building things to a certain degree, but drawing used to be his thing. So I don't really draw as much at all, but I still have like stuff in my room where I'm just like, I used to draw like pretty often, but now it's not kind of my like passion like it used to be.
So now more you are writing books and things of that nature now?
Yes. So I've written 2 fantasy novels, one called The Unveiled and one called The Unraveled. So if any of your listeners are like into Harry Potter or any of like the new like Black-centered fantasies like Children of Blood and Bone or The Gilded Ones, this is like a great series I think that people can attack, and especially by an indie author. I think I did a pretty good job to ensure there's a quality work out there. But yeah, writing was always something I did as a kid. I think the first thought to like, and I did poetry throughout college, but I think the first thought of like writing a book came like maybe when I was about to graduate, and I was like, oh wow, I can write a book and like put it out there. And so that's kind of like what I love to do. I always loved writing. The books were just the next step.
So could you explain that process of what goes into even saying, hey, I'm going to write a book? Because I mean, that's not something small. That's not a simple task. So what made you say time to write a book, and how did you start that process? How was that process?
So I started in around 2013 or no, 2013. I was going into my junior year, or I was in the middle of my junior year of college. And And the story came to me. I think it was because, and even during that time, it was just like a rough period. I was like, school is hard, everything's hard. I'm trying to keep, my scholarship and all these different things in my head. And I think it was just like kind of an escape was art. And I think that services a lot of people. I think if you're upset one day, or even like you, like being able to have these conversations with people might help like to alleviate some of the stress of day to day. And so it started off like that. And I remember when I first started writing, I just naturally started like wanting, like just making the characters like what I've already seen. I'm just like, well, why don't I make them like, why would they not be Black characters? And so during this time, there weren't any real books out here that center that. Now I'm seeing more and more on the scene. I read a lot. That's something that I've always loved. But prior to like kind of like or around 2013, 2014, you weren't really seeing like a lot of Black fantasy or a little bit of sci-fi here and there. What's her name? I forgot her name. Dang, I just read her name. But the one who wrote A Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler. Yeah, she like, that's sci-fi centered, but nothing really fantasy. And I also noticed that like just a lot of Black people didn't really like might not read it because they don't really see themselves in it. So it kind of became in 2013 like a passion infused project versus like something that I actually really loved. And so the first step was writing that first book, which took me about a year and a half. I decided to write the complete series before I put the first one out. So that first one was done maybe by the end of or by middle of 2014, towards the end actually rather. And then I completed the entire series around 2018, so the beginning of 2018. And then like a few months later, I put out the first book, The Unveiled, which was probably one of the hardest journeys. You kind of, if you do it well, just because you want to make sure you pay for an editor, so I had a copy edit and a line editor, and then that's like a few $1,000s. And you got to get a cover artist, get it copyrighted, all those different things. So I would say financially, the journey was probably about like around 10,000, a little bit less. But the journey as far as getting here, like just putting the products all together and making sure I did it as perfectly as I could as a one-man show as an indie author, was probably like a solid 5 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that most individuals don't realize how long it takes for somebody to write a book. Because to go from thought to paper to actually organizing it, making it make sense, getting the idea, selling the idea to others for them to actually be able to, I don't know, because I was going to ask you, like, did you fund the book entirely on your own, or did you have people investing in it?
I funded it totally on my own. I made a lot of the money back after once I got into the rhythm. So I go to a lot of conventions where I could sell like, books there. And for those reasons, I also, obviously social media helps a lot. Just getting featured in different places. But starting off, I had to save up that 10,000. And that was something that I thought that, like even now I think about like the things that I like sacrifice, like it's not huge things. I had a car, but the fact that 20, like I put out 2 books now, and each one, that process was probably about 10,000. Like that's a brand new car, right off the rip. But now coming up into my still in my youth and being like, hey, I'm still accomplished a lot of things I would have accomplished otherwise. I think it was worth it. But during the time, saving that amount of money, and at that time, I think I was 20. I just turned 26 when I put out this first book. So I was, saving up all those months and things of that sort, just trying to make sure that I had the space to put something out. So short answer, yes, I did have to save up the 10,000, but I think the biggest, hardest part was making sure that I like made a profits in order to put out the next book. So
yeah, absolutely. And when you, how was it getting it published? Did you go to different publishers? Did the first one say, okay, I like this, I'm going to do it? How did that go?
So I actually decided to stay completely indie. So there's like, there's independent artists and there's artists that are published or signed. Same way in the music realm. So I'm heavily in music too. But just I thought I knew that we were entering a space of like where you can become influential enough and kind of have your own brand. And so I was just like, if I wait long enough and if I'm consistent, especially now that like with as more stuff happens and I'm getting now into a place where I'm like, I can, put my finances and kind of gear my space towards, my own brand and stuff like that. And I think anything can happen in a second. But in my mind, I was like, I'm recognizing the time we're moving in. Music has already kind of arrived there. It's like, the only reason I would see somebody or I'd encourage somebody to sign is if like, like you're poor and you kind of might need that boost. And even then I'd probably like, just wait it out because, you can form a fan base on your own and sell and do all those different things. But music has already kind of taken that next step to being like, hey, I'm just going to stay independent and sell music and do what I got to do and stuff like that, versus like, and own all your stuff and not have to worry about that later. So I wanted to keep that same respect. I didn't want anybody coming in. I had written the whole series. So I think the first thing, but I will say that like before I published it, the process was I got beta readers, like you kind of normally would. So I got people to read the first 3 chapters, give me their opinion, would they keep reading it and just enter in like this survey. So I had maybe about 12 different people, random people, do that for me. And I had like 2 or 3 read the entire thing and tell me what they thought so I can make edits and things of that sort. So I think that was a great well into the process because you kind of want to hit different markets. And so you want to, and telling the story as difficult as it is, is a process and you kind of want to make sure you keep people in. So I would say up until that process, I didn't have any intention of being published. And I'm not saying that like, someone might find the first 2 books and offer me a deal and who might know us for the future. But as far as like what my intentions are, as far as now being a person that's like, not really having any need to do that, I kind of wanted to stay in that realm. But definitely want to make sure that if I hit different audiences or if I'm at a convention or if I send this book out for review, that the person who's reading it will likely, say good things about it. And most of the time it is. I think the lowest, I've had 1, 2 before, which was kind of like baffling, but everybody else normally like does like 4s and 5s. So it's pretty good.
Good. So now you said Bailey's? What
no,
did you say?
Beta reading.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, so it's where you get like random people. Yeah.
Okay.
And I recommend everybody do that. Don't talk to like I love when people when they do music, like invite, like we all have Instagram. Even now this might be potential contact. I'll be like, hey, let me send you something over and stuff like that. Like just tell me your honest opinion. Like don't ask your friends. Unless you've cultivated a friend group of complete, like a-holes that are gonna be honest. I'm probably the only one in my friend group. Like, don't ask me if you don't want the right answer, the answer that's going to be honest. My goal is not to, I like even say that, it's like, my goal is not to like hurt your feelings, but like my goal is to see you be successful. And so those are 2 separate things. And my family cultivated that. Like when people saw like my family, they'd probably be like from the outside looking in, they might be like, well, wow, y'all have so much accountability. I'm like, well, that's how it kind of should be. I would hate for me to come home and my mom know I could do better. And the only thing that she's like, that's not the only thing she says. But I remember one time when I was like in maybe middle, I had like all A's and 1B. And she was like, MC, I know you know this stuff. Like, why did this happen? You know what I mean? Like just to have a conversation about it. Good job. But let's talk about like why this is happening. Cause I can understand that like something might be off or stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I could read a good story, but it'd do a discredit to the person I'm beta reading for if I'm not like, I like that, but like, why is this even necessary or blah, blah, blah. So the same with music, because I think there's not a lot of people out here that tell people when it comes to music, like, hey, this isn't, good or something like that. And it's not to say who's going to be right or wrong at the end when put something out, but the fact that like, hey, I'm just letting you know as a total subset of a market that exists in this world that these are my feelings about it. And so that's what beta reading was me pulling from, different people that like either like I'd seen their aesthetic and I'm like, well, this person probably doesn't like reads all nonfiction because all they post on Instagram is like, I don't know, flowers and like, coffee and what they're drinking day to day. Like they're probably reading self-help books. Like if I had at least take a guess, but let me send them this fantasy first 3 chapters and see what they say. And if they're like, you know what, like this isn't typically my thing, but I'll read it and they read it and they like it, you have a good chance of being like, connecting in some facet to that market. And so that's what beta reading essentially is. Beta listeners, all that.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable in everything, not just
I agree.
music and books, but everything. Most entrepreneurs, unfortunately, when they first start off, they kind of look for that hug from society.
Yeah.
So they go to friends and people that they know to say, "Oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job." Instead of going to that person to say that this is horrible and you may need to improve, hear that, because it's okay to hear that you're not perfect. I think that in these times, unfortunately, a lot of people want that. They want that constant praise because of the social media world we live in. Like you post something, you get a like, you get happy.
Exactly.
But that's not real life. Like sometimes you don't get it right. I don't get it right. People don't get it right. And it takes somebody to say, let's just try to come at this at a different angle. So I like that. I like that the fact that you went to individuals like, hey, let me know what you think of the first three. Because if they don't want to read past the first three, you already know. Like
that's the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the Netflix effect, right? And most people sit and watch Netflix and don't even catch this. So I'm probably about to educate a lot of people on this. How Netflix get us is they series, any series that you watch on Netflix, I promise you, is going to have a very slow start. Then it's going to hit you very quickly, right? With just action or sex or whatever it is. It hits you quick. And then it goes back to a little crawl and then it speeds up. It's the roller coaster effect. So I'm going to, first you're going to be like, oh, this is getting me in, but it's taking too long. And then it hits you. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's next? What's next? And then it kind of goes into a little slow mode of other things. May not talk about the main character so much and involve everybody else, but it's just sucking you in. And I feel like that's how everything should be sold. If you get that formula where I'm not going to give you everything, but I'm going to give you the first 3 chapters. And I'm going to have that in there so I can build the background story, get you to say, get you invested in these characters. So you can say, oh, I may want to read past this because now it's just getting started. He introduced me to other characters and I want to know their stories as well. I'm not a writer. I'm just a person who sells stuff. So I feel like all of it's the same. It's a Netflix effect. Because I noticed that on series, because everybody's Netflix. And it's like, that's how you get us to sit there and binge watch on the weekend when we off, because we just can't stop. But that's a great idea. And I never heard of that before today. I just always thought that that's what I do with fitness programs that I create. I get tester people, I send it out. They let me know what they like. They let me know what they don't like. Then I present it to my customers. So, and these people I care about and they're friends, but we're honest. We just an honest group. So if it sucks, they're like, Tate, this sucks. This makes 0 sense. But and over time, things have got better. But when I first started, it was pretty bad. So, that's great. That's definitely good. So right now you have 2 books up under your belt, correct?
Yes.
Are we working on our 3rd one?
Yeah, so I actually completed the whole series before putting out the first one. So it's just kind of like spacing them out far enough to where I'm like, all right, let's try something new marketing wise. The first one has sold I try to make sure each one it's selling their 1,000 copies and whatnot. And the first one did really well. The world was open, so we were doing a lot more. We were doing pop-up shops, conventions, friends. It's your first book, so literally people random friends, random people were messaging you hey, I bought your book or stuff like that. Even on my Instagram, I was like, wow, people just poured out the woodworks to support this. And so now, like you said, shifting into this new social media space, it is, I like you said, I think it's very centered in all respects. Even more so is that effect, that Netflix effect, I think will help a lot of people. I think if you can do something crazy or have something spontaneous online, it's going to drive people to want to oh, let me get with this or something like that. And I think so it's really each time I put out the 3rd or before I put out the 3rd, I want to get a mastery of that. I would like to make that 1,000 books mark. because that's when I know for certain that I made my money back. But because kind of like, but like again, like the goal isn't necessarily here to make money in the short run. It's to have a quality series out there that people can, enjoy, and in the long run will generate, revenue. I'd like to see this on movies and stuff like that. So the second one came out December 22nd or 21st of last year. So I have a little bit more of a space to do things and still figuring those things out. I mean, because we're coming up on a year. But the third one probably won't come out until at least another year and a quarter. So I still have a little bit of time before I decide to put that one out. But I'm excited more so to kind of promote this second one and make sure that, like, the things that I do now marketing wise, kind of gear up for that. I've had a few conventions this year, so that's been good. But until, like, I think I meet that mark of, like, all right, I found that I've cultivated, something more than what I had from the first one, is when I'll probably put out the third one.
Absolutely. Yeah. That makes sense. I did watch all the Harry Potters, but I never read the books at all. I just got caught up, like, I guess the rest of the world when it came out. I was like, well, what is this about? I saw it like years after all of them came out. I finally sat down and watched the same thing with Pirates of the Caribbean. I was like, oh, well, what is this about? But I think spacing them out, giving people time, again, it's all about that salesmanship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're building up, and they just like, okay, I can't wait for the next one. When is he going to drop the next one? And it's the anticipation that builds up. And I think that's a great marketing tool to use, if it's on purpose or not. Kind of this situation where the world shut down for a little bit, that kind of helped everyone regroup and think of things different and see how they was going to actually promote what it was doing differently, because we're in a different world. Like, the world will never go back to 2019. People wanted to, but it would never. So that means business has totally changed. How you do things, this right here has changed. Some I do in person, some I do over Zoom. I'm comfortable with both, but it's all about timing. If I can interview 10 people in a day by doing Zoom, I'm going to do that instead of driving all over and doing two, in this Atlanta traffic. So,
exactly.
You have to adjust and come up with ways to make sure that you stay on top of what you're doing. So the books are absolutely amazing, but I write poetry myself, so I have to ask you about your poetry. Gotta ask you about sitting down and just the motivation. Where does it come from? What do you typically write about when you do write?
So I do everything. So I write music too a lot, but the poetry started when I was, like I said, that's been a part of me since I was a kid. I used to write, I'd have contests, like my first book was like this little book called The Little Frog, and it went like all the way up to nationals. But I would illustrate and write my own books. But when it came to poetry, you could write your own thing and perform it, or you could just perform poetry. Either one of those things you could do. You could write your own or not. And so it just was always just a way for me to kind of express a feeling. So my typical things, I don't think I have anything that's like raw in like happiness, I would say. Probably, I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but definitely what all of the poets have in common is like raw emotion. So most of the time, like I wrote one when I was talking to a friend about suicide, and we were just talking about like how, like, at least give yourself like, X amount of D, like, to like feel recovered, or don't be afraid to seek help. And so, and he was like, well, no, that's weak sauce and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, well, when you're in your mom's womb, like, you're like encompassed, you got all your nutrition. So then I was just like, let me write, a poem about like, evading suicide called 9 Months, and being like, pay those back. And so it was just like, just off the dome. And it's just like a lot of the things I think I talk about when it comes to writing is those feelings, is making sure that, like, I'm conveying to someone a powerful message. Definitely a lot more different than, writing fantasy, when I'm like, there's going to be lessons in this, but typically I'm just trying to tell a story. Wherein it's poetry, I think it's just conveying to people, that like their feelings are valid, and this is why, so. But that's typically what happens when I sit down. I don't think I've ever been able to sit down and be like, hey, I'm going to write a poem today. and it
Yeah.
go like this. But when it comes to me, I'm like, scratch everything, third stuff. I woken up out of like the bed to be, and that's one thing I stopped as a kid. I used to like, if I had an idea or I was dreaming about something that was good, I would stay asleep and then be like livid when I woke up the next morning and couldn't remember it. So around teenage years, I would like sleep with like either like a piece of paper or something. So that way, if I could do it, I'll just wake up and do it immediately. And
Yeah.
so even if you just write down like something that would just jog the memory, because my memory is pretty good anyway. But that was just something that I started doing. So now, but now, like if I feel something, or if I even hear a song, or if I'm walking around the house humming something, I'm just like, oh, that would be fire, like against this. I just sit down and write then. So both music for songs, and then or lyrics for songs, and then poetry have to come to me, and I just take it from there.
So your writing is pretty much like therapy, right?
Yeah, it definitely, especially the music and the poetry. Those things mean something to me. One day I would like to, and that's the thing. Like now I'm coming into a space which is nerve wracking, being like, all right, you have the capital now, and it's a blessing to say that COVID kind of, helped guide that, as opposed to like, the opposite for a lot of other people. So I want to recognize that there is a privilege, and very thankful for that. But now, like, being able to be like, wow, I'm still like uber young, and like everything's good, to where I'm like, all right, let's center some, money of putting stuff out there that's, not necessarily just in the effort to grow my brand. I think that'll just continue happening as the years go by, or as the days go by, because anything can happen. I could put out a fire song tomorrow and everybody's like, oh, wow. You know what I mean? But I think just continuing to put out things out there that like encompass and help me throughout the day. So I would like to, one day put out like a poetry visual, maybe, of like the things that I've done, and have somebody, film and record it. And that wouldn't be like a terrible thing either. So, yeah, I would say like, I guess in the future, I'm not sure if you answered your question when it came to that, but definitely in the very, very near future. I'm working on the EP right now that will be out at the end of this year. I just want to make sure that I'm continuously like creating things. And now that subset that was once, just something that was on the side, or something that I'm like, I'm always going to love this, but, I got to make sure I keep, MC in this career in corporate world, like forefront. It's now kind of like coming out of head to heads, where I'm just like, this is my opportunity now to like push this stuff up, and, and see what the world thinks. And so I think that's a great place to be in. But when it comes to writing and stuff like that, I'm happy that I have continued that, because if I got to this space without material, it'd be fascinating. It'd be a terrible situation. So yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, since you do write music, you write poetry, you write literature, is it hard balancing all three? Because that's a lot. Most people struggle with one, like writer's block. So like is it hard juggling the three?
I don't know. My anxiety is like out this world. So like I've always like it's honestly been something that's more therapeutic. I feel like those things help me more than I like aid them. So I don't think it's ever, all that to say, like it's never a feeling of like, well dang, I gotta sit down and write like, 1,000 words. It's always like, today has been a rough work week. Let me sit down and write 1,000 words. You know what I mean? So even when I wrote the whole series, I wrote all. It's 5 books total, so there's 2 out right now. So hopefully we'll put the rest out. But I finished the last 3 in like 3 months each. So I was writing like 1,000 words a day as I got out of as I came home from work, and it just helped to me therapeutically, like kind of to like escape from like my reality. Music's the same way. Like when I hear music, it's like thought invoking and stuff to me. So I'm excited as a person who's just started like kind of, putting that actually out to like do more and more and more, and people, being able to hear those things. But as far as like the separation of the people, and I do the I wouldn't call it cheesy, but I do the thing of separation of like, that's Hovind, this is MC. Over here, he's going to talk about fantasy all day and stuff like that. That's MC. He'll be at a convention and talk about your costume, or talk about what character you're trying to be, or stuff like that, or even talk about art or things of that sort. Hovind's very light, like this is an artistic man. He's going to be over here writing poetry. He'll get into a studio and go head to head, and he'll also probably be out, like a little bit more, networky, but mixed up, and then mixed selling. That's my real name is probably a little bit more like, you know, if I'm in business, I'm in business, and that's just what it is. You know what I mean? So I think it's easy to separate it in that respect and say in those pockets, in those buckets. But I think it's not hard or difficult as far as like with my interactions to people to turn that on and turn this off. And I think that's kind of when people get the surprise. They're like, oh wow, you do X or da da da. And it's like, well, what were your assumptions about me? Like, which one of these three people did you think I was? Because I'm all of them, but like, why did you think I might be like, oh, he likes fantasy more so, or write stuff like that? Or and people that actually know me would know that I do. Like one of my friends called me and she was like, MC, like the third person is like, MC writes fantasy? Like it's like something that he wouldn't do. And they're like, she's like, it didn't surprise her because it makes her realize like how much they don't know me. And so it's just like, cause it's always something that I would watch her do. Or the fact that music has always been something when it's just like, that's been like something that's always been a part of my life. Like I started off in church choirs and stuff like that. So, or just the ambition. I think sometimes people don't like, especially like going to UGA, like I think they cultivated something in us that like made us crazy, and the anxiety is unreal. But just even the fact that sometimes people look at me and probably don't think like he's a smart individual, like it's so I think it helps. I think it's those three subsets help me, but more so they probably help people just to visualize me in those different respects without like causing like a, you know, a rift in the process. I would hate somebody to be like, you know, I can't connect with him because he writes fantasy but also does music. But when they realize like this is all a culmination of these three facets of me, I think it helps kind of in the translation.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I just asked that because again, I know that individuals struggle with reality and what they make their reality, and that happens with a lot of creatives because they come to a crossroad and it's just like, which one has to go?
Yeah.
One of them has to go eventually because at some time, maybe not for their entire lives, but at one, they come to the crossroad at some point in their life and it's like, okay, something has to go because I need more space to be this.
Yeah.
I need space to be that. And with that, it just comes a lot of soul searching at times, a lot of doubt, a lot of what everybody is thinking, what I should be. So it's just, that's why I asked that question, because again, you juggling three different, always writing, but it's still three different forms of writing.
Yeah. So, I think that's the hard part. I mean, people have done it. I think, and to speak on that moment, I think I am like slowly inching towards. I think it's probably because I'm still have that youthful spirit, but I still feel like I'm like, all right, MC, like we're nearing those 30s, like, you know, we got to kind of think about like, you know, what are we going to censor, or it's like you got to realize like you're not going to be digestible in all these different ways. But then I think of people like Childish Gambino, or, you know, who like act and rap and do poetry, sing, direct and playwright and does comedy, or Issa Rae, you know, who does the like, or all these different people. And I think I'm still in the phase of like assimilating thought to be like, I'm more like that. Like I am that one in a million, as opposed to like, all right, MC, like, you know, there's 100 over here that we're in this direction as far as like Black fantasy writers that you can easily get into. But like, if you do this, like how many people are going to actually try to listen to your music, or how many people are going to try to do these things and stuff like that. But I think at the base of all of this, even if I don't see, you know, the light in those respects, I think I probably wouldn't stop creating. I think at the end of the day, in my head, I'm like, you know, I'm happy creating. Like when I go to the studio, I'm like, oh, this is a good time. Even if I had to write for somebody else, another artist, or even just going to like a girl DM'd my book page and it's like, hey, you know, I liked your book so much. I met you at Savannah Comic-Con. And she was like, I immediately bought the second one. And then she was like, is it okay if I do like a 3D art thing of the manga, which is in the book? And I was like stuff like that, like speaks so much more to me than probably just being like, MC's the #1 bestseller. Now, who doesn't want to be a bestseller? I just don't think that my gratification is coming from those things. And to be honest, I had a wake up moment with myself with that. I think my whole life, and a lot of our whole lives has been like the instant gratification of like even when I bought my house, I'm like, well, I bought a house. Or even when I got, you know, a new car, I'm like, I got a new car. When I put out the 2 book, I'm like, I put a book out. when I graduated college. Like I graduated college, but it's like saying that to someone doesn't gratify anything because it's just like you're only saying that in comparison, I think, in to like people who haven't. So I'm like, if I became a bestseller, like I would only be saying that in lieu of like that's what the world tells me to do, and that other people haven't done it. It has to come from someplace else. And so, in order for me to feel the actual gratification, so I think the actual space for me is like people actually being touched. There's a million people that are bestsellers. I know people that have bought Michelle Obama's book and none of them have read it. And I'm just like, like I don't know if that would mean something to me. Like I'd be like, what the heck, you know what I mean? Or like the fact that like I get to read Octavia E. Butler's work and like her being like not even acknowledged in her life, and like her not being able to finish the third book because she died, and it being like, wow, this is like great work, like, and just to get to honor her in that respect, like I think I would be in heaven like smiling, you know what I mean? Like those things I think matter a little bit more to me, and I don't think that necessarily might not come with the accolades. I think a lot of our best artists probably don't have, the accolades that they would. Like I'm a huge Emily Sandé fan, or even Lenny Kravitz, or just these different people that are great, have great musicianship and great vocal control and things of that sort, or even the gospel singers that I grew up on, like aren't going to get like the gratification of, being like, I sold out a stadium, but like, what does that actually mean? And so I think just in the long run, hopefully I hold on to that. But in the long, as far as now, the hard part, I think, is the making money portion. And I'm not in a space of like, thank God that like where I'm dependent upon like, like, hey, I need instant gratification because if I don't, like, I don't get the things I want. I think both are kind of working in concert really well. Like I've been able to, thank God, to be, like I can go to work. I work remotely, and my job's completely remotely, and we have like unlimited PTO and things like that. So I can work from different places in the world, and it just helps to be like, if I have a convention this weekend, I'm flying out to one in Miami. Tomorrow, it's just like I can do it. You know what I mean? Until like the time comes where I'm just like, I can dedicate all my time to books because they're selling out, or I've made the next marketing move, and people are like, oh, let me buy this man's book. Like, and that's something, just not to, like to continue to expound, but like that's something I think we don't calculate. We always calculate the like it probably won't, or you might not have enough space, but it's like you might be an IG post, or or for you to say like you could get, I was about to say a random celebrity's name, but Tyson Beckford's pretty rip. But like just anybody that like the next like post could come from Oprah, and you have the best quality product out there, because that's like really what the other key part is, like not only getting that vouch, but also having something quality for people to be able to take from you. And so I think like those moments, I think I am waiting for and happen way often. And if that happens, if someone posts my book and I know they're good books and they post it and people read them, that's all I needed, like, to get to my next space. So I think those moments are closer to happening than not. So might as well keep going, even if I don't get my first taste until, 7 years from now when I'm 35, like I'd be stoked to be like, I'm still living and kicking it, and like my dreams got to come true. So
yeah, absolutely. So what is next for you? What do you have on the agenda? What's next?
So I really want to like dive back into social media. That's always been a passion. So I did I don't know how you met Elandis, but the guy he referenced me, but we both went to school together in college. So I used to run or curate the UGA Black Alumni Instagram page, and then I did a little bit for Pandora. And so it was something that the music people. So I've always had like a passion of being like, all right, there's ways to draw people in. Let's cultivate that. And it's been something I've enjoyed. It's just like, like being like, oh, I could post a meme and stuff like that. And something people have opinions about him. I think Lil Nas is fantastic because he's great at marketing. And I think a lot of people could take notes from like marketability, because it's like the goal is to get people to talk about whatever you're posting or what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, and I think people don't realize like how like that helps people. This is the first time kind of where it helps in like, I think in a light where someone actually talented gets something, but like even the bad Barbie girl who like raps and was like on Dr. Phil, like if we hadn't probably tweeted about like, look at this crazy girl, like, like would she be where she is today? So I think on social media is a great way to market. Like it just takes one moment. So I'd like to kind of hone into that. So I've been thinking about like, doing photos, putting my music up against TikTok. That's essentially how I first heard Old Town Country Road, was like through a meme, and that's how he got famous. And so I think like that's a great way to start. So what's next on me is definitely emerging more into social media now that like I'm in a space, like I said, where I'm just like, all right, let's use these marketing dollars, but also let's market what we got for free. Like there's plenty of spaces and avenues to do things for free. There's plenty of people to talk to, plenty of events to go networking out. That's probably another thing that I've always done, but now I'm probably going to cultivate more towards the arts. So my friends have been like, I've told my friends that are still in the media world, because like I said, when I worked for Pandora, it was great networking and meeting artists and stuff like that all the time, and being like, oh, we're going to a party or blah blah blah, which is not my thing, or putting on events. But just that networking piece, or like even the people that like I met like on I met one of Jamie Foxx artists just like in meeting and talking, and like we exchange. So it just helps to kind of cultivate like I said, like that constant reassurance in planting those seeds in these different spaces, hoping for one of them to grow. And the good news, like I said, like about like, it might get hard to balance all of them, but the good news is if I make a popping song and the music blows up, 9 times out of 10, somebody's be like, oh, this man writes books too, or at least I have a platform now to promote those. It'll also follow suit. So I would say, so attacking social media, the networking part is a big portion, just because I have products out there now. The EP is coming at the end of the year, so I'm excited to put out my first body of work. I've done one single before, but now it's time to kind of like cultivate a thing. My producer's fantastic. So I'm excited about that. And then also using, like I said, about them, which I didn't get to get into specifics of, and hopefully like by the end of this year, you might see something, but I like to use more of my dollars towards marketing on a higher scale. So I think that's something good. I'm still going on like auditions and stuff like that, like keeping my foot in just like different avenues. I want to keep doing things like this, like interviewing and having like real conversations. I think that was something that I missed a lot about like prior to 2019. And like you said, I think there was a shift now to where it's like, oh, we could do a lot more virtually. You know what I mean? Like, but nobody ever considered it. And it's like, if someone had started prior, like, I wonder what their life would look like now. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, at the bare minimum, continuing to move with innovation is my goal. So that's pretty much all I have on my plate, I think, right now. Continuing to, I've been working out a lot too. So that's something that initially I was very like into it. I think I had like I definitely had very, very like critical expectations of what my body should look like. And now I've gotten to a space where I'm just like, like I'm working out and I'm like enjoying the process of finding MC and kind of being like, oh wow, I still got it, So I think that's something that I've been uber passionate about lately. So I think those things, just because like there's like a goal in mind, it's like, if I look my best, I feel my best, and the world sees that. And so those are the things, especially this end part of 2020, which is 2021, which is kind of going to be jam packed anyway. Just making sure that I'm continuing to push those things now that I'm in a space where I'm like, I can fully like, aim and shoot at my goals.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to book you or buy your book or anything, how could they contact you?
So they can go to either of my Instagrams, or my book's Instagram rather, that Unveiled series. That's UNVEILED series, SERIES. Or they can find me on IG, and this is either on Twitter and Instagram. They can find me at Hoven El Ray. That's JOVENELRAY. They can also go to my website, hovenelray.com. And that's pretty much, those are my only kind of I think socials as of now. You can please like the Unveiled series on Facebook. My email, you can email me directly from my Instagram as well. Or shoot me a DM via Twitter. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, but any of those means are acceptable.
That's awesome. So before I let you go, I had to ask you, how did 2020 affect what you're doing? Did it affect you at all?
So I was one of the lucky ones. And it hurts me to even like have this conversation, even when I talk to other people, and it's just kind of like very hard to kind of do it. But like I would have to be honest and vulnerable in space. 2020 kind of helped me in a lot of respects. I was able to, when I was working for Pandora, I was able to interview like a whole bunch of people and continue those networks, just because, even keeping a job was a blessing. I know a lot of people lost their job, but when we went virtual, it just was fine. Same thing. I was able to continue writing and put out that second book, which was beautiful. So to have 10,000 to kind of do that and do it well again was beautiful. Got to interview a few like bestsellers too. Like my friends, thank you for that. Amina, for putting me on. I got to interview a few like bestsellers that were in the genre as me, that helped me to kind of boost myself as well. Musically, I was able to put out that single. So 2020 honestly allowed me to continue going, and I think that's the blessing. I don't think even if 2020 didn't happen the way it did, to be honest, like I don't even know if I'd be able to like have saved enough to get the car or get to the new car or this house. So I would say 2020. I don't want to say it was like due to 2020. It might have been due to my like ability to be like, all right, well, we're shifting this direction. You can't go to conventions anymore because the world's closed. Like, what's the next step? What can I focus on right now so that way I'm not just wasting a year? And so, so I think it affected me in a positive way. Not unfortunately, but gratefully. So
good. Well, I want to thank you for sitting down with the schoolers and actually telling us all about your journey. Telling us about the 3 different spaces of writing that you're in, which is very unique, from your music to your poetry to your books. Looking forward to the 3rd drop. You got to come back on this show and tell us. You got to tell us exactly when you're going to drop. But
yes.
I really do appreciate you sitting down, and I wish you all the best. I know that you're going to be very successful. So you just keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Great. And I will be seeing you at the top.
All right.